The command deck of the TSS Valiant hummed with tension. Admiral Elias Voss stood at the center, his gaze fixed on the holographic display before him. The Galactic Council's blockade had begun. A fleet of 50 warships, a force designed to suffocate and intimidate, hovered at the edge of Erebus Station, humanity's industrial lifeline. Their presence was a declaration: surrender or be erased. A cold, metallic voice crackled through the comms. Admiral Voss. This is Supreme Executor Orlan of the Galactic Council. Your people have violated the Edict of Exile. Disarm immediately, or we will commence planetary bombardment. Voss allowed a beat of silence before responding. His voice was even, but there was steel beneath it. Executor Orlan, Earth accepted exile. We built our own way. You had your chance to ignore us. Now you come with threats? Orlan's voice was devoid of amusement. You have overstepped. The sovereignty will be dismantled. Voss smiled grimly. The Council expected him to beg for negotiation, to scramble for a diplomatic solution. They still didn't understand humans. He turned to his tactical officer. Is the net in place? Lieutenant Marakin nodded. All ships are in position. The moment we give the order, the Council's fleet will be boxed in. Voss leaned forward. Then let's show them what exile has made of us. The trap is sprung. On the holographic display, the blockade fleet remained in rigid formation, oblivious to the danger. They had the numbers, but the Terran sovereignty had precision. Voss made a simple gesture. Execute. From the darkness beyond Erebus Station, the sovereignty's stealth fleet decloaked. Ships that had been invisible to scanners now erupted into motion, forming a perfect kill box around the enemy. The blockade's flanks were suddenly exposed, a fatal mistake. The first strike came from the TSS Judicator, its rail cannons firing hyper-accelerated tungsten rounds straight through the unshielded sides of a Council dreadnought. Explosions tore through its hull. The once imposing blockade fleet now scrambled, caught between fire from all angles. Orlan's face flickered onto the comms again, now furious. You dare attack the Council? This is madness, Voss. You cannot win. Voss's expression didn't waver. You think we built all this just to surrender? You should have let us be. The enemy fleet attempted to regroup, but they weren't prepared for Terran warfare. Where Council ships were massive, cumbersome, designed to overwhelm through sheer presence, sovereignty warships were precise, adaptive, and brutal. Keen called out, her voice sharp. We have a Council battleship attempting to break formation. Orders? Voss didn't hesitate. Disable its engines. Let them drift. The TSS Revenant fired a salvo of ion torpedoes, striking the enemy warship's thrusters. The once mighty vessel spiraled, helpless in the void. In less than 15 minutes, the blockade had collapsed. A prisoner, and a warning. Voss strode into the Valiant's brig, where the captured Council Admiral, Corvin Sale, was bound in energy restraints. The alien, a high-ranking strategist, had been plucked from his disabled cruiser before its self-destruct could activate. Sale, a reptilian Dortak, lifted his gaze, his golden eyes burning with contempt. You do not understand what you've done, human. Voss crossed his arms. I understand perfectly. We just dismantled your blockade in under an hour. Sale bared his fangs. You think this was a test of strength? No, Admiral Voss. This was a provocation. The Council's true fleet is already mobilizing. The words chilled the room. This wasn't just about Erebus Station. The Council was preparing for all-out war. Voss exhaled slowly. Then they'll get one. He turned on his heel, already planning his next move. The Terran sovereignty would not kneel. And this was only the beginning. A cold silence filled the command deck of the TSS Valiant. Admiral Elias Voss stared at the tactical display, his face carved from stone. They were coming. The Galactic Council's main battle fleet had bypassed Erebus Station and was en route to the Sol system. Earth was the target. The fleet's composition was staggering, over 300 warships, including 2 planetary-class dreadnoughts, each capable of reducing a world to ash. The Terran sovereignty's forces were outnumbered 6-1. This wasn't an invasion. It was an extermination. Voss exhaled, steady. Fear was an indulgence he couldn't afford. Humans had never won by playing fair. He turned to his officers. Are the defenses ready? Marakin, his tactical officer, nodded. Orbital platforms are fully armed. The Luna defense grid is online. The fleet is standing by. Commander Riker, his second-in-command, frowned. But it won't be enough. Voss allowed himself a grim smile. It will be if we fight like humans. The storm breaks. The first Council ships arrived in system like a wave of darkness. Hundreds of sleek warships dropped from slip space, weapons primed. The void around Earth shimmered as Terran ships moved into position, forming a defensive line between the planet and annihilation. The comms crackled. A deep, resonant voice filled the bridge. This is High Chancellor Zephyr. Humanity's time in this galaxy has ended. Surrender, and your extinction will be swift. Voss chuckled. Zephyr, you should have killed us when you had the chance. Without another word, he gave the order. Fire! From Luna's surface, hidden rail batteries thundered to life, launching hypersonic projectiles at near-light speeds. The first Council battlecruiser in the formation was obliterated instantly, its shields useless against the sheer kinetic force. The Sovereignty fleet surged forward, their maneuverable warships weaving through the Council's slower, more rigid formations. The void exploded with battle. A fight on two fronts. The Council fleet retaliated. Their dreadnoughts unleashed plasma lances, carving through space, forcing Terran ships into evasive maneuvers. A Terran destroyer, the TSS Halberd, took a direct hit and erupted into fire, breaking apart into debris. Keen's voice was sharp. We just lost the Halberd. The Council is pushing toward high orbit. Voss clenched his jaw. If they reached Earth's lower orbit, the planet's surface would be vulnerable. He turned to Riker. Tell the Archangels it's time. Across the battlefield, hidden within the chaos, Terran stealth frigates uncloaked and released their payloads, experimental gravitic warheads, weapons unlike anything the galaxy had seen. A Council battleship at the front of their formation was the first to be hit. The moment the warhead detonated, space itself bent and twisted, the ship's hull crushed inward as its own gravity collapsed upon itself. Then another warhead detonated. And another. Within moments, entire sections of the Council's fleet were imploding under the weight of their own existence. For the first time, the enemy hesitated. A personal duel. Zephyr's flagship, the Leviathan, pushed through the chaos, cutting a straight path toward Earth. Voss narrowed his eyes. The High Chancellor was coming personally. Helm, take us in. The Valiant surged forward, directly toward the Leviathan. The two flagships closed the distance in seconds, exchanging devastating broadsides. Shields flickered. Hulls cracked. Then, a breach alarm screamed across the bridge. Boarders. Face to face with the enemy. Voss drew his sidearm and moved with practiced precision. The doors to the bridge blasted inward, and Council assassins in dark armor poured in. A 3-meter-tall Zorvaxian warrior lunged at him, its plasma blades slicing through the air. Voss dodged, raised his pistol, and fired. The shot punched through the alien's skull. Keen and Riker fought beside him, cutting down the enemy, but more poured in. The bridge was being overrun. Then Zephyr himself stepped through the breach. The High Chancellor's eyes gleamed, his expression unreadable. You are an impressive species, Admiral. But your defiance ends today. Voss didn't waste words. He fired. Zephyr moved like a phantom, dodging the shot with unnatural speed. Before Voss could react, a strike sent him crashing into the bulkhead. Pain flared through his ribs, but he forced himself to his feet. He wasn't going to die here. Keen lunged at Zephyr with a combat knife, but the Chancellor caught her wrist and twisted. She cried out as he tossed her aside like a ragdoll. Voss wiped blood from his lip. You want to end us? Then finish it. Zephyr smiled. Gladly. The turning point. Before the Chancellor could strike, a deafening explosion rocked the ship. Alarms blared. On the holoscreen, the Leviathan was breaking apart. Outside, the battle had shifted. Terran forces had taken control of the high orbit. The Council's fleet was in full retreat. Cypher snarled. Impossible! Voss smirked. We don't do impossible. We do victory. At that moment, Keen, injured but alive, fired her pistol. The shot clipped Cypher's shoulder, forcing him back. Voss didn't hesitate. He lunged, slamming the Chancellor backward. The impact sent Cypher stumbling through the still open airlock. The emergency blast doors sealed shut, cutting him off. Cypher's final words echoed through the comms before he vanished into the void. This isn't over. Aftermath. The battlefield belonged to humanity. The Council fleet was shattered, retreating beyond the system. Earth stood victorious. Voss exhaled, surveying the wreckage. They had won this battle. But the war had only just begun. The aftermath of the battle hung over the Sol system like a phantom. Wreckage drifted in orbit, broken pieces of Council and Terran warships tumbling silently through the void. The stench of war clung to every frequency: distress signals, emergency transmissions, the occasional burst of static where a ship's comm system had been obliterated. Admiral Elias Voss stood on the Valiant's bridge, watching as his crew worked tirelessly to assess the damage. Their victory had been decisive, but it had come at a cost. Hundreds of thousands dead. Dozens of ships lost. And worst of all, there was no time to grieve. The Council had retreated, but they would return. Next time, they wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating humanity. Voss turned to Commander Riker. Status report. Riker rubbed a hand over his face, exhaustion evident in his features. Luna's orbital defenses are still operational, but we took severe losses. Nearly a third of our fleet is gone. The enemy didn't break us, but they damn near bled us dry. Voss nodded, absorbing the weight of the words. And the Council? Mara Keen, her arm in a sling from the fight aboard the Valiant, tapped at her console. Recon probes tracked their remaining forces regrouping at the Sirius system. It's not a full withdrawal. More like a tactical retreat. Voss narrowed his eyes. They're buying time. Keen nodded. That's what it looks like. The realization settled over the bridge like a shadow. The Council had thrown an overwhelming force at them, and still failed. That meant only one thing: the next attack wouldn't be a conventional battle. It would be annihilation. The choice before humanity. The door to the bridge slid open, and Director Naomi Vasquez of the Sovereignty High Command strode in, her expression unreadable. Unlike the military brass, she represented the political leadership of the Sovereignty, the architects of the human exodus after Earth had been exiled from the Galactic Council. She didn't waste time. Admiral, we need to talk. Voss motioned for his officers to remain at their stations as he followed her into the adjacent strategy room. The holographic display lit up, showing a map of Council-controlled space, a vast, sprawling empire of hundreds of worlds. At the very center sat Velar Prime, the heart of the Council. Vasquez turned to him, her gaze sharp. We both know the Council won't stop until we're ashes. We've won the first battle, but we cannot win a war of attrition. Not against an enemy with their resources. Voss leaned against the table, studying the map. You have something in mind. She nodded. A counteroffensive. But not the kind they expect. She tapped a sequence into the console, and the display zoomed in on a single point of interest: a shipyard orbiting Velar Prime. A classified weapons facility. Voss raised an eyebrow. You want to take the fight straight to the Council's capital? Vasquez's expression didn't waver. I want to show them that they're not untouchable. Right now, they still believe we're a backwater species, dangerous but not a true threat. If we strike Velar Prime, we shatter that illusion. We force them to reconsider this war. Voss exhaled slowly. It was a bold plan. Insane, even. And yet, it was exactly the kind of move humanity had always excelled at. We'll need our best, he said at last. And we'll need to move fast. The Unseen War. 2 days later, the TSS Revenant, the most advanced stealth warship in the Sovereignty's fleet, slipped from a hidden dockyard near Mars. Its mission was simple: breach Council space, infiltrate Velar Prime's orbital defenses, and cripple their weapons production before the next assault. On board, Captain Elias Ward adjusted the straps of his flight harness, his squad seated around him in the drop bay. They were all veterans, survivors of the siege at Erebus, men and women who had no illusions about what they were walking into. He activated his comm. "Admiral, we're locked and ready." Voss's voice came through clear. "We don't get a second chance at this, Ward. If you're compromised, there's no cavalry coming." Ward smirked. "Wouldn't have it any other way." The Revenant jumped to slip space, vanishing into the void. Infiltration. Hours later, they emerged at the edges of the Velar Prime system. From the observation deck, Ward took in the scene: a massive ring of orbital defenses surrounding the Council's jewel world. Gun platforms, patrol ships, planetary shields. The most fortified system in the galaxy. And his team was going to walk straight into it. Keen's voice came over the encrypted channel. "We've mapped a blind spot in their sensor net. If you time it perfectly, you can slip through undetected." Ward turned to his team. "You heard the lady. Let's do this." The Revenant glided forward, its experimental stealth plating bending light and energy around it, rendering it nearly invisible to scanners. As they neared the shipyard, Ward gave the order: "Engage infiltration protocols." The ship's belly opened, and 12 drop pods shot into the darkness, each one carrying an elite operative. They hit the docking bay like silent meteors, magnetic clamps securing them to the hull. Ward cut through the bulkhead, and within moments they were inside. No alarms. No resistance. Yet. Sabotage and betrayal. They moved swiftly, planting high-yield fusion charges along the main reactor conduits. The plan was to cripple the shipyard's energy core, forcing a catastrophic overload that would take half the station with it. But as they reached the final sector, Ward froze. His HUD flickered. A security override. And then the lights snapped on. They had been expected. From the upper catwalks, Council enforcers emerged, weapons trained. And standing at the forefront was Admiral Corvin Sale, the same Council officer captured at Erebus Station. Ward's blood ran cold. Son of a bitch. Sale's reptilian features twisted into something almost amused. "You humans! Always so predictable." The enforcers opened fire. The last stand. Ward's team scattered, returning fire. Plasma and kinetic rounds tore through the shipyard. Explosions rippled through the facility as some of the charges detonated prematurely. Ward ducked behind cover, shouting into his comm. "Revenant, we're compromised. Get out of here!" From orbit, the ship's captain responded. "We can still extract." "No." Ward checked the detonator. "Still active." He looked to his team, bloody but still standing. "We finished the mission." They fought their way to the final charge, planting it at the reactor core. Alarms blared. More Council forces swarmed in. There was no way out. Ward activated the detonator. Across Velar Prime's orbit, the shipyard detonated in a blinding fireball, its wreckage crashing down toward the planet below. In the chaos, the Revenant slipped away, unseen. The mission had succeeded. But at a cost. The fires of war still burned in the void. Wreckage from the Velar Prime shipyard tumbled toward the planet's upper atmosphere, blazing like falling stars. What had once been a fortified jewel of the Galactic Council was now a graveyard. But even in destruction, the enemy would not relent. On board the TSS Valiant, Admiral Elias Voss listened to the incoming reports. Ward's team had completed their mission, at the cost of their own lives. The Revenant had barely escaped before the explosion, and now, deep in enemy space, they were being hunted. Commander Riker stood beside him, arms crossed. "The Council will see this as a declaration of total war." Voss exhaled. "They already declared war when they came for Earth." The Council's forces were in disarray, scrambling to secure their crumbling lines. But their pride had taken the greatest blow. The unthinkable had happened. Velar Prime had been attacked. Now, they would retaliate with everything they had. The gathering storm. Director Naomi Vasquez entered the command deck, her usual composure strained. We intercepted a council transmission. High Chancellor Zypher is calling for the full mobilization of their armada. They're preparing a final assault. Voss's expression hardened. How long? She hesitated. Less than a week. The weight of it pressed down on everyone in the room. They had bought time, but not enough. Keen, still recovering from her injuries, clenched her fist. Then we hit them first. Riker frowned. With what? We lost a third of our fleet. Even with the damage we did at Vila Prime, they still outgun us. Voss turned toward the tactical display. They couldn't win a straight fight. But they could make sure the Council didn't either. He looked at Vasquez. It's time. She gave a slow nod. You're sure? Voss met her gaze. If we fall back, we die. If we surrender, we die. The only way forward is through. Operation Last Dawn. The order spread through every sovereignty warship, outpost, and hidden base. They weren't going to defend Earth. They were going to end the war. All remaining fleets converged at Titan shipyards, where the last of the experimental warships were being completed. The Excalibur-class dreadnoughts, humanity's final ace. Unlike the Council's Titanic warships, these vessels were smaller, faster, deadlier. Each one was designed for surgical strikes, equipped with experimental weaponry capable of bypassing standard energy shields. They weren't meant to hold the line. They were meant to cut through it. The final battle begins. 3 days later, the Council Armada arrived at Seoul. Over 600 warships, a force larger than anything humanity had ever faced. The fleet stretched across the system, blotting out the stars. High Chancellor Zypher's voice echoed over open channels. This is the end. Surrender, and I may yet allow a fraction of your species to survive. Voss replied without hesitation. Come and take it. Then, the Valiant led the charge. From behind Titan, the Excalibur fleet emerged, moving like ghosts through the void. The Council ships adjusted their formations, too late. The first Excalibur ship, TSS Retribution, cut through the enemy line, its new weaponry slicing through shields like they weren't there. A single salvo tore a dreadnought in half. The sovereignty forces hit hard and fast, their ships moving unpredictably, breaking formations before the Council could adapt. Earth's orbital defenses rained fire, while stealth squadrons struck at supply lines and command vessels. Every ship, every soldier, knew what was at stake. There was no retreat. The duel in the void. In the heart of the chaos, Voss locked onto his true target, Zypher's flagship, the Leviathan. The Council's warlord had underestimated humanity once before. He wouldn't get the chance to do it again. Bring us in close. The Valiant roared toward the Leviathan, weapons blazing. Plasma beams and kinetic rounds exchanged in a deadly dance. The two warships tore into each other, armor plating melting under the onslaught. Then, the Leviathan launched its counterattack. A gravimetric lance struck the Valiant, tearing through its hull. Consoles exploded. Alarms screamed. Keen's voice came through, ragged. Shields are failing. Voss wiped blood from his forehead. Then we don't need them. He issued the command. The Valiant's remaining thrusters ignited, sending the ship directly toward the Leviathan. A Titan falls? Zypher's eyes widened as the Valiant closed in. He understood too late. Voss activated the final command. All hands abandon ship? Pods launched in every direction as the Sovereignty flagship plunged into the heart of the Leviathan. The impact shattered both vessels, a chain reaction igniting their cores. For one terrible moment, silence. Then, a blinding detonation consumed the void. When the fire faded, the Leviathan was gone. And with it, High Chancellor Zypher. The Council breaks. The death of their leader shattered the enemy's morale. Their once coordinated assault crumbled into chaos. Sovereignty forces pushed forward, cutting down the remaining ships. One by one, the Council fleets began to retreat. Victory, at a cost. The battle had been won. Humanity had survived. But the cost was unbearable. The Valiant was gone. Thousands had died. Voss drifted in the wreckage, barely conscious, rescued by a sovereignty gunship. As he was pulled aboard, he looked out at the battlefield. Still stood. The council was broken. They had done the impossible. But war was never truly over. As Vasquez watched the remnants of the enemy flee into the void, she turned to Riker. "They'll come back." He nodded. "And we'll be ready." Humanity had been exiled, hunted, nearly wiped from existence. Now, they stood as an empire of their own. A force no longer ignored. The age of the Terran sovereignty had begun.